and potential fine. The risk for the organisation, for the entity that council is the risk of judicial review and having a decision potentially set aside by the courts in this process is the consequence for the organisation. So you see, tracking down through that column on the legal risks, that it really indicates the difference of consequence for members and for the organisation.
Would it be set aside in part or in full if the declaration was relating only to one specific part of the plan?
I think the court would again take a very proportionate approach. That it would be, council would certainly maintain the position that if anything should be set aside, it should only be that relevant part of the decision making that related to that particular interest.
Thank you.
Thank you. Good question. Councillor Cashmore.
Councillor, could you please just redefine for me that close relationship or association, and perhaps illustrate it with an example?
Sorry, Councillor, I was...
Oh, sorry. Just could you redefine for us, please, the definition of a close relationship or association actually means in reality, what it might look like?
In the examples that you've seen there, it can be family members.
Yep.
It could be a close relationship with an organisation, maybe because you're a trustee of a trust. It may be because you're a beneficiary, and particularly at higher interest if you were the sole beneficiary of a trust, through a shareholding in a company or directorship of a company. And also through, I'm not giving you an exhaustive list, there are a range of ways in which that interest could arise, through organisations of which an elected member is a member, and where, in this context, where that organisation may have made a submission.
Well, I guess my question is context, Madam Chair. Where does the line draw? For instance, if someone had shares in a property development company that was publicly listed, would that put you in conflict? A whole lot of provisions around potential unitary plan on that, or is that too distant? Too distant.
Yeah, so I'm reluctant to get drawn into specific examples, but at a very high level, and it depends on knowing all of the relevant facts. But the interest in common with the public, in the sense of those who are shareholders in a publicly listed company, is likely to be a significant number of people. So again, very context specific as to whether that would be a relevant interest, and you would need to look at, would that listed company have anything that may be affected by the unitary plan decision making. So there is care needed, but it's not an absolute that just because you're a shareholder in a listed company there's an interest. But all these things need to be worked through.
Thank you.
And that's a good segue into the fact that Catherine and the team will be available to meet with every member of the committee, and I would presume every member of the committee would meet the team to go through their own personal declarations and any possible conflicts. And I've gone through that myself, and it's a very, very useful process to go through.
Depends on how
Councillor Ross-Clow.
It's just that on that page 15, the last one on predetermination, and I totally understand what that's about, but it says there how they're going to vote before they've listened fairly to all the arguments. In many ways, what's coming back from the entry plan is not a set of arguments, is we're getting a determination. Where are the arguments going to come from? Is that just going to be staff giving us the counter arguments? Because it is a determination.
So what the panel will be sending through to the council is recommendation reports, and their recommendation reports need to give the reasons why they are recommending changes to the plans. So they will be setting out, if they do choose to change aspects of the plan, they need to give their reasons. They also need to give a Section 32 analysis, which is that cost-benefit analysis of the impact of the changes they're suggesting, and then they will give us a clean version of their recommended version of the plan, so showing how their recommended changes change the plan. But it's not just a recommendation, they have to give us the reasons for those changes.
Thank you.
Can I just make sure I've got that? So the staff are bringing us recommendations for change?
No,
No, I didn't
the
think I had.
panel,
The panel, you're
the
talking
panel
about the
will
panel,
be
not the staff.
delivering recommendations.
With their reasons for
With their
change.
reasons and the Section 32 analysis for their reasons for changing.
So then it's over to us.
And then you guys, sorry, the governing body and the committee will consider the recommendations and those reasons and decide whether they agree with the reasons given for the changes or not.
Okay.
I've got a couple of questions that might belong here and might not. But while you were going through all those case studies, I kept thinking about Councillor Debbie Hewitt of the Ruitaniwha Dam, who the Auditor General said could make a decision even though she did have a financial interest in the outcome. So maybe I should save that for the Auditor General. Yeah, because it's a very odd decision, that one. I've got
The
three
Auditor General's office
questions.
don't make odd decisions.
3 questions, and it might not be appropriate here, but I keep thinking in 30 days we're making decisions on the unitary plan, in 80 days a new council will be elected. And in that interregnum period, there's going to be an awful lot of people speaking out. And it's about that in terms of these, these guidelines. You're talking about the decision makers. I'm interested in whether these guidelines affect other members of Auckland Council in terms of other elected members, not us. That's the first part of that question. I can give you the rest if you like.
Should we do them one at a time, Councillor
Okay.
Casey, because that's a good question.
Whether or not to declare whether or not you have an interest, should declare it, and what you might do about that, is only relevant when you're in the decision-making seat. So, for other parts of council that are not decision makers, they will not be required to assess or declare conflicts of interest because they are not decision makers.
Okay, what about Bernard writes a headline about one of the recommendations and people respond. We can't respond, the decision makers can't respond. Can other members of Auckland Council respond?
I guess
You're talking about local board members.
Yes, I am.
And the reality is there's no way that we can control everything that happens in this process. I guess, wouldn't it be great if we could actually enter this process kind of in a dignified way and step through the recommendations and work it through and be supported by all other arms of council to do that. I don't know if that's achievable, but we need to stay separate from that chaos and sit as decision makers, exactly as Len has said. Basically, we're a panel of judges who need to be required to focus on what's in front of us and not be diverted by the external issues.
Well, just along the same lines, again, it's the election period as well as being the unitary plan period. If a candidate, that would be everyone in this room who is standing again, is at a public meeting and all candidates on the platform are asked a question about the unitary plan, does that mean that the only person who can't answer it is the decision maker and that everybody else can have a good go at them?
Well, Councillor, that's probably a very good reason then to have the decision made and completed by the 19th of August.
It also means that the current mayor can't speak, but every other wannabe mayor can. Is that right?
Well, there's no stopping any other wannabe mayors from speaking.
Yeah. Okay, that was first question. My second one was, I remember when we had the quite fraught meeting about the withdrawal of the upzoning plans, the maps, sorry. Yeah. And I remember some legal advice then that almost you were damned if you did and damned if you didn't. Will the effect, is there any effect of that decision made on that day, which was quite a close vote, can that come back and bite any one of the parties on the bum, either the nays or the yeas? Sorry about the word bum, I couldn't think of one.
I do want to give some confidence to you around that. It's not uncommon in a long-running process to have parts of the process where there's very heated and spirited debate And what happened in this committee was decisions about what council's position would be before the panel. In that context, the panel is taking into account council's position and the position of other submitters and making a recommendation back to us. What's important is that there's a continuing open mind to receive what the panel has to say to council and its recommendations and its reasons. That would only be problematic in the sense of anyone was indicating that they would refuse to look or consider any recommendations that were the same subject matter. And my understanding is that everyone here will be bringing an open mind to that discussion in the context of quite a distinct phase of considering the panel's recommendations where it has heard from everybody.
And that kind of segues into my last, which I think you've actually answered. When you're looking at things you may have said in the past about a certain issue, someone could basically go back for years to find out your position on a thing. But for the last few months, all of us have been told not to speak out because we have to go open-minded into the final decision-making. So if somebody does come with a big litany of stuff you've said about something, that can be dismissed as, yeah, that was then, and now I'm entering the new phase with an open mind.
The new you.
That's the answer. The new me.
Yeah.
That's it, right?
That's it. I think that's a good summary of where we're at. Other questions before we just take a
Madam Chair, can I
2-minute
just
break?
very quickly pick up on the point about local boards? I'm not sure whether we got a direct or clear enough answer on that. I think that, clearly the local boards aren't sitting around the table, but they have been as close to the action as anyone. So it would be helpful to just be clearer around their responsibility, either moral or legal, in terms of maintaining some degree of decorum during the course of that 11 days.
Perhaps I could comment that the early June memorandum that was circulated to all members of this committee and local board chairs, in terms of which included the local board role, acknowledged expressly that they're not subject to the same restrictions officially as decision makers in waiting as other people around this table, but did ask them, this was from Stephen, to respect the position that elected members are in their decision making role.
And that's the relationship that councillors have with their local boards, which in most cases is a pretty good one. Okay, right, I think that's the end of your part of the presentation. We'll just take a quick 2-minute break and then we'll swap over to OAG.